Welcome to Everything Life and Financial Freedom. We are your hosts, Linda and Jim McKissack. If you know our story, you know that we went from over $600,000 in debt to having financial freedom. We share some of the insights and practical tips that we've learned over the last 30 years for achieving financial freedom, building wealth, and building an extraordinary life. Let's get started with today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Everything Life and Financial Freedom. I'm Linda McKissack.
And I'm Jim McKissack.
And by the way, for those of you that don't know who we are, maybe you're listening in for the first time, Jim and I are just two ordinary people who decided we wanted an extraordinary life and began to read and learn and study from people who had extraordinary lives and had freedom and options that we didn't have, and then just started to put those things in place. And now we're on a journey to help other people do the same thing, that realize that, hey, we're not Bill Gates, we're not Warren Buffett, we weren't born someone like that, but anybody who decides that they want to have an extraordinary life can. And so we're featuring on this podcast lots of different people who've done a good job in the vehicles that they've chosen to do that. And you and I have mostly chosen businesses and real estate investing.
Right. Mainly residential real estate investing.
Yeah. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is, or I think that keeps people a lot from even investing in the first place, is the fear of the property management side of it. Don't you agree?
Yeah. Everybody worries about the houses and what's going to happen to them and all those kind of different fears and stuff. But, property management is a very, very, very important arm of the investment process.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is typically a property manager charges say if you have one or two houses or something, they typically charge around 10% of whatever the monthly rent is. So let's say the rent was $1,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, typically the property manager would charge $100 a month to manage that property. And what management includes is getting the property leased for them, lining up repairs and maintenance on the property if it needs to be done on possibly doing inspections of the property for the owners and stuff, and giving the owners a monthly accounting of everything that's gone on for the month, and writes them a check every month after the rent was paid to the management company.
Yeah. So, and I think we've done the whole gamut. We started out maybe managing our own when we first started getting in the very beginning. And I think that there's some of the pros, I think, to that is you kind of understand some of the issues that a property manager deals with when you do it.
Yeah. And, for us in the beginning, it was the reason why was to try to save. We thought we were saving the money.
Yeah.
And so that was the main reason to do it. And it helps your ROI and everything if you're going to be able to manage it yourself. But there's lots of different things that go on in managing a property. Number one, you got to have a lease.
Mm-hmm.
And so where do you get that lease?
Yeah.
And so you have to come up with different ways to do that. And you have to decide what you want your lease to say and how specific the lease needs to be. And then you need to figure out, how do I go out and find a great tenant for the property? And that's probably the hardest part, is qualifying. I mean, it's kind of like whenever you're in the hiring process, you go through a process to hire somebody to go into business with you. And the same process really takes place when you're trying to find someone to come in there and to rent your property. And your success in the investment arm will be based on your ability to go out there and attract and to bring great tenants, into your properties.
Yeah. So I think being cautious and taking your time on that front end part is super important. And I think also, if you kind of think about all of them at one time, it can be overwhelming. And my philosophy has always been, just do what's the next step in front of you. And it doesn't hurt, even if you haven't gotten properties yet. I always say, go find a property manager, sit down with them, be interviewing several of them, because a good property manager can make or break you.
Yeah, they're priceless when you find a great one.
And so go interview them, because one of the reasons you want to interview them on the front end is ask them what price range they need. If they had 100 more houses, they could rent them today, right? That's where you're going to find the sweet spot. So, and I think...
what do you mean by the sweet spot, Linda?
Well, I mean the price range of homes in that area that, man, they don't have enough of them. Everybody wants to rent in that particular price range, whether it's $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, $1,500 a month, whatever it is for your area. That's going to help guide you on where you need to buy properties. Because if you buy too expensive of a property, it may take you a long time to get it get it rented. So property managers can be key, and some of them I think will negotiate too. So go start that process, but also don't let the property management piece of it go and scare you to death. Right? Just do the next best thing in front of you, and you might even find that it's not as hard as you think it is. And you might want to do a few on the front end so that you do understand and appreciate a good property manager.
Yeah. And, just choosing that property manager, and there's a system for doing that also.
Yeah.
And so, it's asking great questions and stuff, and ask them how many properties they manage in that particular area. How long have they been in the property management business? Who actually owns the company that's the property management company? There's lots of great questions you can ask to really go in there and qualify your property manager really well.
Yeah, and I think finding out if there's extra fees that you don't know about, those will make a big difference in.
Yeah, because you're going to sign with the property manager, you're going to sign a property management contract, and typically that contract runs for at least a year, and a lot of them have an automatic renewal, which means if you don't renew them within the time frame that's in the contract, then they renew automatically. And so usually there's a penalty for breaking that contract. And so you need to be real specific on there, and you need to really read the management contract really well, or have somebody read it for you.
Yeah. And I think there's, there's limits you can put in on how much money they can actually spend without getting a hold of you. I think one of the key things, which we have our own in-house person that manages ours, but I think one of the key things is, how much do they check on the property and the condition? Because I think if they don't check on it and let you know as things happen, you can wind up with a big bill someday of repairs that have actually could have been little repairs along the way.
Yeah, here's what we've learned over the years and stuff is that we have our property manager inspect our properties twice a year. And what I mean by that, from the time the lease is signed, within 90 days of the lease being signed, we do a physical inspection of the property. And we include this in our lease and stuff that says that we have the right to go into the property at any time, with notice. And so we set up a time to be able to do that. And then we look at them again 90 days before the lease expires. Over time, that has probably saved us over the 300 properties that we've bought and leased and sold over the years, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's those big repairs, that wind up sneaking up on you.
And even if a property management, someone really looks good on paper, and you do the background checks and you do all the different, checks and everything. And by the way, doing these checks and everything are not complicated anymore. Used to, it was really hard to do that. Technology has really caught up with us, and there's several services that are very inexpensive that do thorough background checks and do credit reports and everything, and they can do them very, very inexpensively. And you can also charge a processing fee on the front end to cover those.
Yeah.
And that's a non-refundable thing that a person puts up to be qualified to rent your property. And so,
one thing too with the property managers is some of them are actually connected to the multiple listing service, and that broadens the group of people who might find it to rent it, right?
Yeah,
so
and typically the best qualified tenants are coming out of the MLSs.
Yeah, so these are people who probably ultimately may eventually be buyers, but they've started out knowing that they need to lease in a city, or maybe they're just new to the city, or they just need to lease for a while. But yeah, so that would be one thing to check with your property manager is, do they have the ability to put your listing in the multiple listing service?
Right.
Yeah. And then we were talking to our daughter the other day, and she was talking about a couple of her rent houses, which we don't manage, because in Texas, if you manage one person's property, you don't have to have a real estate license. But if you manage more than one person, that person has to be licensed by the real estate Texas Real Estate Commission. So she's got her properties with someone else, and she was saying, we asked her, has she been to look at the properties? And she said, no, he doesn't ever seem to want to let me do that. That's not good. I mean, it's your property. You have the right to go in it. And so I would just be a whole lot more assertive with that, and I would go in my properties. And I'd probably find a new property manager.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So, I mean, you got a lot more, ability to do things, even though someone else is managing your property.
Yeah.
And you should do some checking yourself,
And
drive
then
by the property yourself.
if you choose to want to manage your own properties, which there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you better allocate the time and the energy to go do that. And you better
Mhm.
spend some time learning. As far as litigious goes,
Yeah.
property management is the most litigious part of real estate. It's more litigious than sales of real estate.
Litigious.
Litigious, yeah, that's the
Whatever how we
word.
say that
Yeah.
word.
That's
See,
the
told you we were
that's the
told you we were
Texas definition.
told you we were ordinary people.
Yeah, but and so you want to be careful and you want to know the laws and you want to know,
Yes.
all the fair housing laws and things like that that have to do with discrimination and different things.
Yeah, for sure. And never would you want to discriminate. People that have good credit scores are what you're looking for. People who take care of the properties, that's what you're looking for. And so you want to follow the same process always and never
One of the
leave any doubt that you're picking for some other reason.
one of the tips that we got early on from on property management that really helped us a lot was if you're renting to someone that's local, let's say that their past house was in the same
Yeah.
area and stuff, we would physically drive by that house,
Do some
get their
detective work.
address, and look at the outside of the house. And
Mhm.
generally, if the outside was kept up really nice, the
The inside.
inside was nice also.
Yeah.
And so that was a little tip that we learned early on and
Well, and then
kind of incorporated into our system.
and then the car issue. If you go walk by their car, just take a glance down in their car. If it's full of crap and papers everywhere and trash, that's usually not a good sign either.
Yeah.
So you can scope out their car, or you can scope out where they live. You can kind of do a little detective work on the
Yeah.
front end just to try to be as cautious, because the last thing you'd want to do is get the first worst tenant you could get and then burn your whole view of owning real estate in the first place.
The other disadvantage that I had, not so much Linda on the management side, was listening to everyone's story.
Oh yeah,
And
yes.
everyone has a story,
Yes.
and I'm especially weak with
Old
older
people.
older people and people with sad stories. And in the beginning, one of the things that we learned also is, you've got to get over that syndrome.
Yeah.
Number one, you've got to try to pick the best qualified tenant for your property. And number two, we trying to do it with family members, trying to rent family members was another thing that kind of, it can be great or it can not be so great. It really makes Sunday dinners pretty tough whenever you have
Yeah.
to evict your uncle from your house.
Yeah, or your niece or your
Yeah.
cousin or whoever. Yeah, that's a big and honestly, I see a lot of people violate that. Just don't do that, especially if you're new at property management and it's just not good if you can not mix the two. And then the other thing too is when you get someone, they start giving you sad stories, they can pick up on, that you're going to buy that story month after month. And before you know it, you can be months in without the full rent or any rent. And so you got to treat this as a business, and run it like a business.
Yeah.
Don't let your emotions run the business, because that's not good.
You got to realize that, this particular piece of property is an investment vehicle for you and your family. And it's supposed to pay you a certain rate of return on the money that you've invested in it. And so, you've got to treat it, like Linda said, totally like a business and hold that property accountable to bring in the kind of returns that you need. You got to take the emotion out of it and put the logic into it, and know that it needs to pay you a return on your investment. If you're financing the property and paying cash on it, you're going to have a monthly payment every month to the bank or the mortgage company on that property, and
they don't
create a problem for you,
and they don't listen to sad stories.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't get those same stories from the bank.
Well, the stories don't listen to them. I mean, the banks don't listen to them. So
No.
if your tenant's giving you a sad story, the bank ain't going to let you give them a sad story and be okay with not paying your note.
That's true.
Hello. Thank you for listening to the Everything Life and Financial Freedom podcast. For transcripts, resources, and more, visit the episode page on the podcast website at everythinglifeandfinancialfreedom.com. You can also download our Freedom Number worksheet. This worksheet will help you determine the amount of passive income you need to generate each year to sustain the lifestyle you have or the lifestyle you want when you no longer wish to work or simply want the freedom of your time and your money.
The other thing I've noticed about property management, and this would be a good thing. I wish we'd have thought about this on the front end when we picked property managers, but we didn't really know it. But property management companies are made on pennies. In other words, if they don't manage the pennies, they don't make any money, because you can very easily pay for something for a house that you're leasing and get out of sorts before you know it. And the reason we know this firsthand when we owned a property management company and didn't know what the heck we were doing. But so that's something I would pay attention to with my property manager. How good are they at holding money accountable, managing money? Because if they're not very good at managing their own money, they're sure not going to be very good at managing yours or spending yours. So that would be another thing I would probably look at and I'd ask for maybe some references of people that they've been managing for a while.
Absolutely.
Because there's nothing wrong with knowing upfront, and not just trusting what that property manager is telling you. But I think back to, should you do it or should you have someone do it? I think you have to, if it's going to freak you out and you're not going to buy a property at all because of the property management, absolutely go get a property manager. You don't want this to be the obstacle that keeps you from starting investing in real estate at all.
Yeah, we probably should write a course on how to hire a property management company.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
And put that. Well, we should put that together and just put it out as a
Yeah,
a one pager or something.
Usually when Jim says we, it means
usually
Linda,
Linda.
Linda, go do this. So we'll think about that, Jim. We'll put that on the list, on the long list. But what final thoughts would you have either way on them making the decision? Should they use a property manager or should they hire someone?
Well, number one, I would make sure if you're going to decide to manage the property, I would start reading books. I would start learning. I would start doing things right now and reading anything you can find. There's some good resources on property management.
Yeah.
And there's some basic rules and everything that you really need to know to do that. Remember that the key thing is finding a great tenant for your property.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding a great tenant means somebody that can pay their rent on time every month and take care of your property at the same time. You have to find a tenant that really has the pride of ownership while they're leasing your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finding that great tenant. I mean, lots of times you may have to go through 2 or 3 different tenants and turn them down in order to find a good one.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to, I just had, yesterday, I had our lady that works for us that manages our property called me up and she said, I've got a tenant and this tenant has some issues on this particular property. And, I really feel like I should rent to them, but these keep showing up. I said, well, what is the basic rules? I said, are we going to go back to the basics or are we going to listen to a story? There's a lot of red flags in the story that you've been told. Do you want to deal with those red flags all the way through this and then end up having to go through the eviction process and take your time, effort, energy to go down to the courthouse and do all that stuff? Because that's the potential that you're setting yourself up for with this property.
Yeah.
And so she made the decision not to rent it and pass and go find a great tenant. And I said, I'd rather the house be vacant for a month and us find a great tenant than it, be rented and have someone that's very, very questionable.
Yeah. It's going to cause you issues
property.
the whole time. That's a really good point. Yeah. And I think even having somebody, if you're going to manage it yourself, I think this is a good point. Have somebody you can talk through, because when you're sitting face to face someone, you're buying those stories, but you got to listen to your red flags. And so I love that she had the wisdom to pick up the phone and run it past you.
Most property management companies won't do that. I mean, they'll have a
That's
basic
true.
set of rules
That's
that
true.
they have, and they'll go by those rules. But if they ever get to that gray area where it's questionable, very seldom will they pick up the phone and call you. I would probably request that
Yeah.
from a property management company. If you've got something that looks questionable on this person, call me before you.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes just talking it out with someone, I know I do this when I hire someone, I fall in love with the person. And so I need 2 things: one, space away from the person. And then I also need somebody else that I can talk it out with, because having myself talk it out, I hear the red flags and I go, I know I shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that a property management company really does, Linda, is that, they're in communication all the time with the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you're doing it yourself, you've got to be able to have the time, effort, and
Mhm.
energy for that person to pick up the phone and call you.
Yeah.
You know, with a great property management company, it puts you an arm's length
Mm-hmm.
between the tenant and the property management company. So everything is driven through the property management company. So you don't have to deal with those things.
Yeah, and we've said this before too. I think if we were starting all over again, we would start with someone else managing the properties for sure. Because number one, our time and dollar value could be so much higher doing other things, and they're worth their weight in gold if you get a good one. But I think we've always said too, if you run another business and you have an assistant, get your assistant some training on how to do that and let them take a few of the properties until you get enough to pay the fee for a property manager.
Yeah.
And I think we
And-
said that before, but I
And
want to
even,
reiterate
and
that.
even building, if you're having a real estate team, for
Mhm.
instance, building that team out,
Mhm.
and one of your team members is part of their job is being the property manager.
Yeah.
And getting them trained and everything on property management and focused on property management and
Yeah.
growing the property management side of your business.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So, yeah, again, at the end of the day, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you do the property management? Do you hire a property manager? And I would just say, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, but the only wrong answer is one that's keeping you from moving forward. Period. End of discussion. Do not let the how of a property management stop you. Just take the next step in front of you, and then you'll figure it out. You'll either figure out, okay, I got to figure out where to get a lease. Okay, I got to figure out where to get a property manager. But for us, I think if we were starting over again, we would definitely just find property managers.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Jim, I guess I'll see you in next episode.
Okay. Sounds great.
See you then.
Thanks for listening today. If you haven't already, please subscribe and share this podcast with others. The greatest compliment you can give us is to leave a 5-star review, and please feel free to reach out to us at info@lindamckissack.com. We would love to hear from you about any ideas, topics, or guests to include on our podcast. So see you next time.